Because this is like such a short experience this afternoon of a track, I want to try and pack in as much as I can. So I've packed in the most people that I could possibly find on a panel. This panel's called How to Thrive in Cross-Platform Development and Publishing. And I would like to welcome to the stage my lovely Craig Chapple from Sensor Tower, Jasmin Dahncke from Mainframe Industries, Ryan Black from DLA Piper, Aras Senyuz from Tencent, and Dr. Jaime Gonzalo from Huawei AppGallery. Please come to the stage. Welcome. Give them a round of applause. They're probably really nervous. They won't be after this.
Right, thanks everyone for attending this session. I've got some amazing panelists with me. So today we're going to be talking about how to thrive in cross-platform development and publishing. So if you look at the synopsis, so you'll gain insight from our industry veterans, not myself, on the cross-platform process, and we'll discuss kind of best practices and tips to ensure success with your game, hopefully. So I guess the first thing we'll do is we'll do some introductions. So firstly, myself, moderating this panel, I'm Craig Chapple. I'm Mobile Insight Strategist at Sensor Tower. It's like a mobile intelligence firm. And basically what my random title means is that I write blog posts and help do reports. But yeah, we've got an amazing panel with us. So I just want to kick off with you, Ryan, and if you introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Ryan Black. I'm a lawyer from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So a little bit of a trek to get here, but happy to be here. I practice almost exclusively with internet-facing technology companies like video game companies. And I work at the law firm DLA Piper. We have offices in 40 countries and 4,000 lawyers, so chances are there's someone near you. I'm here largely to talk about my experience helping game developers and publishers as they navigate the platform from the legal perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jaime Gonzalo. My team developed and runs the Huawei AppGallery, which is the third biggest app store in the world. I come from a heavy game development background. I spent 7 years at EA, 4 years at Activision Blizzard, 2 at Gameloft. So I know the developer side before I moved into platforms, and I was managing the Google Play Games App Store for EMEA for a couple of years also.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jasmin. I'm a senior UX designer. I work at Mainframe Industries, and we're currently working on a cloud-native MMO. So there are a lot of learnings from the dev side on how to develop for several platforms, basically. Thanks.
My name is Aras. I'm on the publishing side of things. So I've been publishing games since a decade now, mostly in Europe and Asia, for Tencent games now, in multiple platforms. So I run a team of like 50 people in different countries. For like publishing cross-platform games. So that's about me.
All right, thanks very much. So we've got a very kind of diverse panel here from all kind of sides of the industry. I've obviously got our questions to go through, but if anyone has a question while we're going, then please let me know. But first, I'll just start off with kind of setting the scene, really. Obviously, it has a very obvious meaning, but kind of to you, like, what are the kind of definitions that you could use for cross-platform? I guess there's, the obvious one, but are there any others as well?
So from Huawei, we have a good vision of the different platforms and devices that people tend to use. And something interesting is happening. Until, let's say, 3 years ago, the phone was the king of the Christmas gifts. You are offered a phone or you offer a phone to a friend, that was a safe win. But now, this is changing. People are keeping the phones longer, and they start to have attention and interest for other devices. Smartwatches, drones, other screens start to call our attention. There are watches that now allow to go jogging and running, listening to music without your phone. So the diversification of the eyeballs starts to be a thing. And that's why, especially since the quarantine period, the PC has regained importance again, thanks to the video conferencing and the remote work. So it is more and more important for developers to consider this diversification of eyeballs and not put all your eggs in the basket of one screen.
That's really interesting on PCs, actually. I'm sure I heard years ago that people were saying, PC is kind of going away, and actually I don't hear that at all anymore. It seems sort of a resurgence. Anyone else, kind of your own definitions?
Well, I'll just add that it's interesting that I come at it from both a gamer perspective and a lawyer perspective. From the gamer perspective, when people ask me what platform I play on, I say yes, because if there's a platform that exists, I own it and I play games on it. But what's really interesting is a lot of those phone platforms that you were talking about, they have multiple app stores on it. Obviously not Apple's, but Android and PC. There's lots of different ways to get at games, and there's lots of different markets for your games, and it's not just one. And so being cross-platform can even be on the same device. Having a game that works effectively across all the major stores on an Android device, or having a game that works effectively across the Epic and Steam and GOG version of your game. These can also be multi-platform. So it's important not to just think about devices, but also ecosystems.
Is that like different rules and regulations, I guess, for each on the legal side? And
well, I mean, I don't even want to think about all the licensing agreements that are involved, but that's why you hire folks like me. We worry about that.
Yes. So, one of the interesting I find is, obviously cross-platform is you can play between PC, console, and mobile, but not just that, you've got your licenses that can kind of transfer between. So sometimes you just have a separate game for console and an entirely new game, but I still kind of personally consider that cross-platform. But perhaps now we kind of set the scene, but why bother doing cross-platform at all? Why not just focus on console or mobile or PC? I don't know, Aras, you want to?
Yeah, first of all, it's about consumers. We are appealing to a huge range of age groups, right? So we have the kids, we have teenagers, we have older guys like us, and so everybody has a different habit, and especially depending on the age group, retention also changes a lot. Kids are more used to grow up with a mobile phone compared to us, for example, and because of that, you have to be appealing to them to be able to, get their attention. Their retention rates are very different compared to a PC or console player who owns a game, and when you open up a PC, you don't close it out right away, but in mobile, you can just flip up and get rid of the game immediately and switch to something else. So that's not the same procedure. And obviously, as long as we have, esports going on, big ecosystems of, supporting elements of games, some platforms will never die because of that. For example, esports is mostly driven by PC, so mobile is, mostly driven by a huge population compared to, and different age groups. We have Minecraft, we have Roblox, which are appealing to millions of people that never played PC or console before. So because of that, for developers or publishers like ourselves, it's very important to be able to, transform this and have this experience across the platforms, which is a very difficult thing, by the way, because you have the UI problems, you have the, game control problems, different devices, capabilities, etc. So right now we see only a certain type of games who are successful in cross-platform business, but I think everybody's going there. Everybody has to go there because Jasmin said, it's important to appeal to a larger audience by a developer perspective as a publisher perspective. You cannot stay a console publisher for long and stay competitive right now. So I think that's the main issue at the moment.
Yeah, I can maybe also touch on that. Exactly as you said, it's about reaching broader audiences, of course, and you mentioned as a challenge, of course, now the different input devices, the different controls, the UI, they are challenging for sure, especially in my discipline. That's our job to figure it out. However, I actually see cross-platform is actually the most impressive and probably the biggest accessibility feature of all times. Never could we not only reach more audiences, but the hardware spec kind of falls away. You can truly play with all your friends because they do not need to own a certain device. Most people, the infrastructure regarding mobile is fairly broad already. You don't need to own an Xbox anymore to play Fortnite with your friend or someone in your family, which is, I think, that is where the value also is. Besides that, the input devices, again, enable players to create, or enable us to create for the players a very accessible kind of game, because you can hook up a gamepad, you can use a mouse or a keyboard, you can use the touch devices. So I think that's where the value is.
I find that interesting that you say it's really good for accessibility, but I wonder if there's another side to that where it's actually quite challenging to create a game for cross-platform when they have very distinct inputs. So creating a game for mobile, you're really working with a touch device, and then for console players, you've now got to map that to a controller, or maybe even more difficult the other way around, mapping a controller to a touch device. So how kind of challenging is that, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that is actually the most challenging part, because actually mobile maps very well to a keyboard mouse. Your finger is technically a mouse. So it's quite simple. The way that we approached it is I basically map or visualize a lot of buttons or presses already on each platform. And so, for example, in the last couple of years in console, the so-called free cursor has been a state of the art as well, besides the slot-based movement. So now you basically have a mouse, in most games. I think Ubisoft has done a lot, and Destiny 2, 1 and 2 are probably one of the main examples. So it makes it a bit easier for us. We want to go with both ways if we can, because, for example, I'm very dedicated to accessibility, so having a slot-based approach or movement makes our game possibly more accessible to players with low visibility. The free cursor mouse is a bit harder for them to use, but so in console there has been the idea of the free cursor, which basically maps the mouse from the PC. But yeah, usually the way to go, you just have to visualize and show keybinds and map them respectively to the controller for the main interactions.
One of the key learnings that we had in my developer years is that if you are planning to do any innovation in your game, plan it from the beginning. If you try to port a game to make it become multi-platform after the game was released in one platform only, you are up for a lot of challenge. I remember the first time we tried to launch FIFA on mobile, we said, we just shrink the PC version and it fits on the screen. It was unplayable. I mean, there was no touchscreen phone. It was a Java phone. So yeah, horrible. So if you already know that you are up for a multi-platform experience, you can design it in a way that you minimize the input and so on. That is the difference between porting a game and designing it to be like that. If you have games like Hearthstone, so to say, it is designed so that you don't have that block of controls or the HUD. The main difficulty, I wouldn't say is that part, you can plan that. The main difficulty is that the screen determines the psychology of the consumer. I will tell this. If you talk to analysts that are not gamers, they will tell you, oh, mobile gamers are like this, PC gamers are like that. Hold on, the mobile gamers and the PC gamers, guess what, are the same people, but they are playing with different machines, and that determines their behavior. For example, when you are watching a series on TV and there's an ad of 1.5 minutes, it's not nice, but you take it. If you're on your mobile phone and there's an ad of 1.5 minutes, I mean, you are already, you have closed the screen. Skip. I mean, you got crazy, you call them, but it's the same user. A video that is 10 seconds, or a session of a game that is a couple of minutes on a phone is acceptable. It's hyper-casual games. If you need to play a mobile game for 2 hours to enjoy it, it's not optimized. But the same user would expect a God of War of 2 hours to enjoy it on a PC. So the screen you're playing determines the experience. That's the difficult part. How to make a game, the same game, fun in the different platforms. The controls can be done, but the storytelling or the components of the game, that is a challenge.
Yeah, there was actually the good talk just before this one that kind of really went into like the relationships between, mobile gamers aren't necessarily just mobile gamers. They can be PC gamers, they can be console gamers. There is a lot of crossover. That's probably why cross-platform is becoming kind of an increasing kind of trend that we're now talking about. So just step back a bit. I wanted to kind of discuss what are some of perhaps the unique challenges that are facing individual platforms. So that can be, again, either mobile, console, or PC. And then once we kind of explain that, and then how does going cross-platform potentially help solve those? So, I know, Jaime, you're talking about there's potentially some privacy issues that are going on. And obviously in mobile, there's issues with kind of user acquisition. So perhaps you could talk to some of that.
I'm very sorry to hijack the microphone, Reese, because by reference I will reply. I will tell you a real story, a true story that happened. This could start with a Jurassic Park sentence of life finds a way. Yeah? We found a high spender of one of our games in AppGallery. AppGallery is an Android store. It's an Android-compatible store. And we are totally privacy-driven. We don't check who is the user, but we see the phone the person was using. This person was spending generously in a country that normally people don't spend so much, and we saw the phone model, and it was unknown. So we contacted the user. We said, we want to make sure that the level you are spending, you can enjoy your game well. Maybe your GPU and so on in the phone is not good enough, and we want to make sure that you're enjoying it if you're so committed to the game. What phone are you using? Oh, I have an iPhone. AppGallery is an Android platform. How are you playing Android games on an iPhone? Oh, no, I use my iPhone for the apps. The games I play on BlueStacks on my PC. So the users find a way for the cross-platform when the developers don't do that extra mile. This user liked our offers in AppGallery and put an emulator on his PC. We learned, and now our PCs launch with AppGallery Mobile, and you can play the mobile games in our PCs, so you don't need to download external emulators. We do that now. But we learned that either we find a solution or others will do for us.
Anyone else got any other kind of perspectives there?
I'll maybe add an interesting war story from the perspective of setting yourself up for success to do a cross-platform game, and that's when you're developing a game and say you find a publisher. That publishing agreement may say things like, we're going to get exclusivity on your game on all platforms in all the world. There are very different people who are strong, different platforms who are strong, different publishers who are strong on different areas. And I had a client that had a very successful game on mobile in North America and was looking to make a push in Europe and Asia, and wanted to frankly partner with someone that was maybe a little bit stronger in those areas. Certainly like the folks that are sitting on the panel here with me, as opposed to the very North American focused publisher they were with. Unfortunately, they'd signed an agreement that basically said, you have to publish with us, and this publisher had no reach into those markets. So one thing I would encourage you to do, not only from designing from the beginning, designing your game to be multi-platform, but also thinking about, it can lead to an awkward discussion sometimes, but making sure that when you're speaking with a publisher, when you're speaking with a platform that's going to help you get your game out to people, that you're not necessarily giving away areas that frankly they don't want or are good at, but that also will hamper you down the road. So it can be awkward to say, hey, do you really need a worldwide territory, or can we carve out like China and Japan because you're not there? But it's really important to have that discussion as opposed to just signing on the dotted line.
I'd be interested to know what you kind of think of some of the other kind of, we've touched upon this a bit earlier, but some of the other kind of big practical and technical challenges in going cross-platform. I think we kind of talked about some of the accessibility and user inputs. I don't know if there's anything else that you could kind of say from the development side. But yeah, there's obviously interesting challenges there.
I might not answer about the developer side. Maybe you guys can answer that. But like in terms of discoverability, for example, or that's a major issue because you have 3 platforms, which like you said, like different habits, etc. So when you have a cross-platform game that applies like 3 platforms or 3, 4, whatever, it's kind of difficult to able to attractive to all of them because you need to hook one consumer from one of them, and you need to convince that the reason you need to play that's fun, but it's also you can make it cross-platform, so you can play it on your mobile as well. But obviously that costs a lot because then your CPI, cost per installs or cost per downloading the game will go up because of the platforms. And one side you are used to like lower cost in mobile, in PC you'll face an enormous cost. In console, it will be free to play. It's very difficult to penetrate free to play games in the console, stuff like that. So that's one. The second one is the retention thing. It's because like retention vastly varies among platforms, and their metrics really doesn't match well. While you see day 2 in like around 50 is successful in one platform, 30 is also successful in another. So you need to be able to have a team to understand, all the platforms, and you need to fix the everything based on those platforms, and attend to the consumer support themes separately, because they will have very different type of problems as well. That's like the second one probably. And the third one is, once you start marketing, for example, it's like we did it a couple of times, it's also important to, focus on first one. I mean, there are cases that you might tackle the wrong platform first, and then if you launch out, for example, the mobile later on, and the other way around, you can also face a lot of challenges, because even the influencers are different in platforms. So you got influencers that are mobile influencers, which are like pretty low, and you have this very fanatical PC console players who are watching Twitch, like following all those influencers who have no idea about for example mobile games. But when you look at the market right now, there are few MMORPG examples that are doing pretty well, because I think like as human beings, like when we have this big sort of challenge, that this is where we start to innovate and try to figure out, not change the platform, but change the game itself from the get-go. So I think that's also important to understand, that the development teams also have a mindset now how we can tackle, different platforms from the development stage. Not just, in the beginning, even for mobile games, you were like focusing on Android first, then you were trying to go iOS, right? But right now you can't do that. So you need to be equally, attractive to both sides, because like, revenue-wise they are the same. So on. So that's my idea about it there.
I just want to quickly follow up on that. You were saying about kind of where you might launch first. Is there a way to know? I'm trying to think how to word this. But is there a way to know like what platform you should launch first before you do it, or at least if you're launching simultaneously, how can you know internally? Okay, where should we put the most marketing spend?
Actually, our process is like very data driven. So we look at the genre, we look at the market in that specific area, and also we look at the region, because even though that we globally launch stuff, we know that, for example, Asia acts totally different because of regulations. So you cannot launch everything at once in China. For example, you need to get permissions and regulations and stuff before launching anything. But Europe and South America is easier to launch everything at once. So like we split it to a couple of regions at the end of the day, because you cannot just straight away launch everywhere. Of course, when you look at that, then you have the challenges like when you look at Japan, is a huge console market. But when you look at Europe, it's a huge PC market and console market as well, for example. So it depends on the region and so on. But if you're talking about, for example, EMEA sort of thing, like it's mobile is like always more attractive in terms of revenue and accessibility. But of course, like other regions are different.
Yeah,
yeah, sure. I can maybe talk a bit also about the dev experience. So we already touched on the scalability challenges or opportunities regarding the different devices. Mainly, it's of course going from PC and TV screen to mobile, because it's just such a big difference. Of course, we touched on the accessibility already that it affords us. There was one additional thing that Jaime actually mentioned is, it's actually a different audience that we engage. So as developers, we also had early on actually talked about, should the game have different features on the mobile device, for example. We steered away from it, but that is definitely something, because the sessioning is different. And we're making an MMO, so how do we? So we need to also have think in game design and in terms of core loop. Okay, how do you play the game on a mobile? What kind of sessioning do we need? What kind of features do we make that it is possible to log in and do something meaningful as a user, for example?
I have a recommendation to minimize the impact. You were asking about how to select, how to make the right decisions. So first of all, lower the difficulty of what you need to do later. If you are planning to do a multi-platform game, consider using middlewares that will make your porting easier than going native from the beginning. There are several options out there. Remember using a couple. The second is, what you need is data to understand which markets to make a decision. Use the channels that provide the data faster. and nothing matches digital. So if you are talking about anything that involves retail console physical goods, if this is still a thing compared to online, try mobile as a fast way to market and get A/B test and get the data to see the appetite. Because maybe on mobile you will have a different reaction than on console. But if you see that, as we've said, in Japan your game is becoming huge on mobile, okay, then probably your console should follow that trend. Make the low-hanging fruit your best friends, and don't bet blindly if you have the chance to get more data. So it's just a matter of planning well, and when you need decisions, the more data, and I think Aras mentioned that, data-driven decisions are always safer than based on gut feeling.
That's a really interesting idea to kind of look at mobile as a way to kind of test certain the game itself or certain features or something. Well, as we've been talking about this, obviously what we're talking about is actually cross-platform is really complex, right? So, and probably time-consuming, probably quite expensive. You've got to release on all different platforms. You've got to make sure you're developing in the end for all, or catering for all the different types of platform. So I guess the question is this just for big publishers, cross-platform? Is that really kind of just for them? Or can smaller developers kind of get in on cross-platform? Ryan, I think you work with some kind of indies on this.
I mean, from my perspective, I've always been impressed. I work with clients who are all the way from very small indie all the way up to AAA international studios, and I've always been impressed at the ability to scale multi-platform, even at the kind of junior or smaller levels now. And this is largely owing to a really diverse marketplace of middleware that works on multiple platforms. If you start right, if you do it right, and you build with the right middleware platform that can scale to other devices and other markets, you'll actually have a relatively easy time going multi-platform. That being said, when you're small and you're trying to figure out what your budget is, you have to plan for all the contingencies. You probably have to put a little bit more money in the kitty than you want to in order to go multi-platform. And doing one platform really well can be lucrative, but there's nothing like the market opening power of being on multiple devices or multiple platforms. It just makes a massive difference. And again, I go back to the Android experience. If you're just on the Google Play Store, it's a big store, get me wrong, but there are other stores I know that you've spoken to where you'll get a massive lift just from even just being on multiple stores on the same device, let alone across other devices.
I have a couple of comments. First of all, totally recommend it to diversify into more Android stores, especially if your game is already built, then try to diversify as you can. Second is based on the importance of indies and smaller developer studios in cross-platform and anything. Having been in big publishers, I know very well the mentality of big companies, and I will share with you. Very rarely, innovation or next-gen in games appears from a big publisher. I remember being in director boards of EA thinking about topics like, should we go wild on VR? And the answer was always the same. The moment it becomes successful, we will follow totally. Big companies have a very big burden of reputation and trust from an audience that is very unforgiving with them when they make something wrong. So very rarely they have to bet on what works. They have to bet. In the case of EA, we had to bet every year on The Sims, on Need for Speed, on FIFA at the time, because that was what kept the business and make the games better and better. But suddenly, a company like Rovio appears and makes a game that is free to download. And at the time, it was like, what? The game, you don't need to pay? No, you pay if you like the game. Now we are very used to that, but at the moment, it was a big revolution. And then Rovio became a big company. But when they tried, they were more of an indie startup. So the startups and the indies in games play a critical, important role in the innovation of what comes. And once in a while, we get Fall Guys. Once in a while, we get, even Flappy Birds. And games that are surprisingly different to what we have seen and are shaking I remember those emergency meetings in the rooms of Activision to understand what happened with this small developer of 20 people that suddenly are getting the top charts compared to Call of Duty. So it is very important we keep that shaking the ground of the big ones so that the industry keeps innovating.
And Jasmin, I think you said you're working on a cross-platform MMO, so I guess
Yeah.
you've got something to say about that.
So my thoughts regarding the questions were just, it depends how ambitious you are. We want to make an MMO, so it's a bit different than if you have some cross-play where you track some leaderboards. So, there is all the scaling that needs to be taken into account, and it might, of course, be easier probably with a publisher that, like Microsoft or others that already afford or have understanding of the technology. Because for us, it's a lot, we work with third-party things, and it's a lot about the support that we get, because it's still a development or a technology in development, so there, can be opportunities to work together with the publisher or others. But, there is still opportunity probably to go on your own, like we are in the studio, we're trying, comes with its own challenges, but it's exciting too. So it's a little bit about that also, like what are you actually trying to build, at what kind of scale?
And I guess this is kind of perhaps the final question. We'll open it up after, but it can be just a yes or no, you can elaborate, but is cross-platform, do you think, is actually the future of games? So most games, if applicable, I guess, will be cross-platform. What do you think?
I can comment on that. The human society is moving to a smart environment direction. The amount of smart devices that we have currently is 2, 3. People have a smart TV, smart watch, smart phone. In 5 years, in 10 years' time, we're going to have 50 smart things around us. So the connection with technology is going to be expected to be automated. In that sense, when you want to play a game, you will not expect to have a console to play that game. You will be playing a game in a car because it's self-driven and you want to play games, and it's expected that the car should give you the experience you want. You would be in your kitchen and your fridge would continue the chapter that you were watching in your living room before, because you are in the kitchen and you decide as a human how your smart home and your smart life adapts to what you want to do. So in that sense, cross-platform is a need. It's something that needs to happen in any experience, not only in games, but in audiovisual content, and things need to work seamlessly and without pressing buttons. We have an example. Recently, we organized with an event that was IKEA and so on, and basically, when the person arrived home, the TV switched on the right channel they wanted to see, and as soon as the person was in the sofa, TV detected the human, the window blinds automatically closed so that the session could continue. And when the person stood up at the end of the movie, the cleaning robot came to clean the popcorn and go back. So nothing of that was provoked by the human giving any order. But all of that answered to the behavioral patterns of the human in that house. So in that sense, games have to continue the path where the human is walking. And that's what has made mobile so successful, the ergonomy, and that's what the games in the future will have to do, adapt to these screens where the human is passing by.
I'll just add that if the metaverse is going to mean anything, it's going to have to be a cross-platform thing. I mean, we already have quote-unquote metaverses that are walled gardens in digital experiences, tied to devices, tied to platforms, tied to a particular game. But if that term that everyone's bandying about, and there's a lot of money being thrown around, let me tell you, as a business lawyer in the game space, there's a lot of money being invested in the Web3/metaverse space right now. If that's going to mean anything, we're going to have to get a little bit more to device agnosticism and platform agnosticism, because the experience that people are going to want, as you're saying, the experience people are going to want is not going to be, I want to play it on this device. It's just going to be, I want to play it. I want to experience it. I want to have my same digital identity on multiple devices and not just this one walled garden.
Yeah, 100% agree. And again, for me, it's not only tech advances, our daily living, but actually we finally invite more people to the table. When I don't know why you all love to game, but I love multiplayer games and I want to play with my friends. And again, cross-platform and cloud gaming enables us to finally, have more people, have more accessibility.
Yeah, I agree. We're already working on multiple cross-platform games especially on MMO side of things. So that's I think the biggest like metaverse. That's the thing that we're gonna see first. And I think there are good examples like Tower of Fantasy that we have multiple games like that. The thing is, we'll see probably in a few years if this is going to be integrated by AR, VR, and all those sort of different machines that we think that they're going to be part of this cycle. We don't know if it's going to be complementary or it's going to be like a different platform or anything like that. But I certainly believe that people, especially like young kids growing up, they're going to come with a certain habit of being able to play with their hands. Okay, so not with a mouse. So even though we're going to use a mouse or gamepad, they will look for certain diverse platforms that should adapt to this. So even we are talking about console, they should be able to adapt to smart devices, like touch screens and stuff like that to be able to. That car example is a pretty good one. Like you will want to play with your hands in that car, right? So you don't want like a gamepad on that. You need something else. So I think that's gonna help us. VR probably gonna help on that. I don't know when, but it's gonna happen. Right now we are on the track of merging all the subgenres into cross-platform. Some genres are falling behind, obviously. Card games are easiest, maybe MMOs are the hardest, or FPS games are the hardest because of control. But we need to find a way that each platform stays competitive within each other without the challenge of the controllers. So I think that's the future. So I agree. Everybody agrees.
All right, that's great. So that's all my questions. But I don't know if anyone in the audience has a question they'd like to ask. We have two people.
I've got to run all the way up and like Annika Rice. No one knows who that is. Where are you? Wait.
Sure. Great, thank you. Juha Hartkainen, UX design lecturer from Lab University of Applied Sciences. I was wondering, is it practical for a developer to differentiate between hardware platforms as our input devices are increasingly cross-platform? For example, like modern PCs or consoles, mobile TV, what have you, can all use keyboard and mouse. They can all use gamepads, touchscreens, extended reality headsets, motion controllers, microphones, cameras, So should developers focus more on designing games for specific controllers or input schemes or interactions rather than specific platforms or operating systems? Or is this some kind of just a niche use case that we don't have to pay attention to?
Sounds like a UX question.
Sorry, one second. My advice is very short. I would reduce as much as you can the dependency on hardware, because maybe you bet on a platform, you're super excited, it's going very well, you did all your movies in a video beta, and then VHS, it's everything years ago. Or you bet everything on a platform and suddenly disappear on a Dreamcast. So everything that you can make it as digital agnostic, platform agnostic as you can, the better you are for the changes that happen constantly in the games industry in levels of hardware.
Yeah, that will be probably more prevalent in the future, as was mentioned, when we start to play in cars, on maybe, a windshield or however that is called. But at the moment, it's just the three basic, inputs, which is touch, controller, and keyboard, mouse. There, you mentioned the VR, which is usually, as a developer, that's a completely different experience, is a different kind of game, different genre, basically. So, but those are the three standard methods, so there is no difference, basically.
I'll just, we'll wrap it up there. So thank you for the questions, and thank you very much to the panel. Please give a round of applause.